A bullied kid stood up for a classmate, unaware it would inspire a school revolution. The words echoed in Ethan's mind like a far-off dream as he stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, fingers tracing the fresh bruise blooming beneath his left eye. Another masterpiece courtesy of Derek Mason and his followers. Another mark of his existence at Westlake High, invisible until he became a target. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting hollow shadows across his pale face. 16 years old, and he'd perfected the art of disappearing. Shoulders hunched, eyes down, path to class calculated to avoid certain hallways, certain people. The bell rang, its shrill cry penetrating the bathroom walls. Ethan's stomach clenched. History class. With them, he splashed cold water on his face, the shock momentarily distracting him from the throbbing pain. Just 10 more months until graduation, 10 more months of survival. He could endure this. He'd endured worse. The hallway stretched before him like a gauntlet as he slipped from the bathroom, his worn backpack clutched against his chest like armor. Students rushed past, a blur of faces and voices, none seeing him, exactly as he preferred. Until graduation. Until escape. Ethan slid into his seat in the back corner of Mr. Harmon's history class, 3 minutes late but unremarked upon. Invisibility had its advantages. He kept his eyes fixed on his notebook, pencil poised, ready to lose himself in the mindless task of note-taking. The familiar routine, the safe path. Today we're discussing the civil rights movement. Mr. Harmon announced, his voice carrying the same enthusiasm it did for every historical topic. Specifically, how individual acts of courage spark collective change. Ironic, Ethan thought, his fingers unconsciously touching his bruised cheek. 10 minutes into class, the door creaked open. Maya Chen stood in the doorway, her dark hair falling across her face in a curtain, her oversized sweater swallowing her small frame. New girl, transferred in last week. Already marked as different. Too quiet, too smart, too foreign. Sorry, she whispered, her accent turning the word musical. Take a seat, Miss Chen. Mr. Harmon nodded, continuing his lecture without pause. Maya scanned the room, her eyes skipping over the barely disguised sneers from Derek's corner. The only empty seat was next to Ethan. He stiffened as she approached, not from fear of her, but from the attention her proximity might draw. Association was dangerous in the ecosystem of high school predators. She sat, a whisper of movement, her textbook opening with a soft crack of new binding. Ethan caught the scent of something gentle, jasmine maybe, before forcing his attention back to Mr. Harmon's lecture. The period passed without incident until the final 10 minutes, when Mr. Harmon assigned group discussions. Partner with the person beside you, he instructed, and discuss how Rosa Parks' individual act of resistance transformed into a community movement. Ethan's heart sank. Interaction. Visibility. Maya turned to him, a tentative smile softening her features. I'm Maya, she said, voice barely audible. Ethan, he replied, equally quiet. Their conversation began awkwardly, both more comfortable with silence than words. But as they spoke of courage and standing up against injustice, something shifted. Maya's eyes lit up when she talked, her hands gesturing gracefully to emphasize points. She was brilliant, connecting historical events to modern parallels with insight that made Ethan momentarily forget where they were, until a crumpled paper hit Maya's cheek. Ethan froze. Across the room, Derek snickered with his friends, another paper ball ready between his fingers. Maya's face flushed deep red, but she said nothing, head bowing as she returned to her notes. Another paper flew, this one containing a slur Ethan could see scrawled in thick marker as it landed on their shared desk. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she pushed it away. Something hot and unfamiliar surged through Ethan's chest. Not fear, though fear was there too. Something sharper. Without thinking, without the careful calculation that had governed his every move for years, he stood up. Stop it, he said, his voice cracking but audible in the suddenly quiet classroom. Derek's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. Look who found his voice, he drawled. The ghost speaks. Leave her alone, Ethan continued, his heart hammering so hard he was certain everyone could hear it. His legs felt like water, but he remained standing. She's done nothing to you. You her boyfriend now? Derek laughed, but there was confusion in his eyes. This wasn't the script. The victim wasn't supposed to speak back. Mr. Mason, that's enough. Mr. Harmon intervened, finally noticing the confrontation. And Mr. Parker, please sit down. Ethan sank back into his seat, adrenaline making his fingers tremble against the desktop. What had he done? The carefully constructed invisibility shattered in a moment of, what? Courage? Stupidity? The bell rang, releasing them, but offering no answers. Maya gathered her books quickly, her movements precise and controlled. Before leaving, she paused, her dark eyes meeting Ethan's. "Thank you," she whispered, the words carrying a weight he couldn't fully comprehend. Then she was gone, lost in the surge of students flooding the hallway. Ethan moved more slowly, resignation settling over him like a familiar blanket. He'd broken the cardinal rule of survival: don't get noticed. There would be consequences. There always were, but as he navigated the hall toward his locker, something strange happened. A nod from Jeremy Collins, a quiet kid from math class. A small smile from Sarah, who sat 2 rows ahead in English. Tiny acknowledgments from the invisible masses who, like him, existed in the spaces between the social hierarchies. The rest of the day passed in tense anticipation, but Derek and his friends maintained an unusual distance. The expected retribution didn't come. Not that afternoon, at least. Instead, Ethan walked home beneath clouds heavy with autumn rain, replaying the moment he stood up, wondering at the unfamiliar feeling that lingered beneath his fear. It felt strangely like the first breath after being underwater too long. The next morning dawned gray and cold, matching the knot in Ethan's stomach as he approached the school. Yesterday's momentary courage seemed foolish in the harsh light of day. He kept his head down, following his usual path of least resistance through the side entrance, braced for whatever awaited him. He nearly collided with Maya at his locker, her small form appearing suddenly before him. "Sorry," they said in unison, then fell into awkward silence. Maya clutched a paper bag in her hands, extending it toward him after a moment's hesitation. "My mother's dumplings," she explained, her eyes meeting his briefly before darting away. For yesterday, the simple gesture, food offered in gratitude, left Ethan momentarily speechless. When was the last time someone had given him anything? He accepted the bag, its warmth seeping into his cold fingers. "You didn't have to," he mumbled, uncomfortable with kindness he hadn't earned. "In my culture, food is how we say the things we cannot speak," she replied, a half smile lifting one corner of her mouth. "I should go to a chemistry test." She turned away, then hesitated. "They will come for you. For us. You know this, yes?" Ethan nodded, the knot in his stomach tightening. He knew. "Then I will see you at lunch," she asked, the question carrying more meaning than its simple words. "Yeah," he answered, surprising himself. "I'll be there." The morning classes blurred together, Ethan's attention divided between the lessons and the growing sense of impending confrontation. By lunch period, his nerves were stretched wire thin. The cafeteria loomed before him like a battlefield, its social territories clearly marked and fiercely defended. Usually he ate quickly in a far corner or skipped lunch entirely, retreating to the library's safety. Today he spotted Maya sitting alone at a table near the windows, sunlight catching in her dark hair. Taking a deep breath, he crossed the room toward her, aware of the eyes tracking his movement, the whispers following his path. He set his tray down across from her. "Hi." Her smile was small but genuine. "You came. I said I would." The words felt significant, a promise kept when promises were rare currency in his life. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, Ethan savoring the dumplings she'd brought him, their subtle flavors unlike anything he'd tasted before. "These are amazing," he told her, earning another smile. "My grandmother's recipe. She says food made with care carries healing." Ethan was contemplating this when shadows fell across their table. Derek stood there, flanked by his usual followers, his expression a practiced mask of contempt. "Well, isn't this sweet?" he drawled, leaning one hand on their table. The freak and the foreigner. Ethan's muscles tensed, fight or flight instincts screaming. But before he could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Back off, Derek." Lily Winters stood behind them, her lunch tray balanced in one hand. Lily, social middle ground, neither popular nor outcast, generally left alone because her father coached the football team. "This isn't your business, Lily," Derek said, but there was uncertainty in his tone. "I'm making it my business," she replied, setting her tray down beside Maya's. "And I'm pretty sure Mr. Harmon would be interested to hear what was written on those notes you threw yesterday." Something shifted in the cafeteria's atmosphere, a collective held breath. Derek's gaze darted around, assessing, calculating. More eyes were watching now. A teacher had paused by the doorway. Whatever," he finally muttered, backing away. "Enjoy your loser convention." Lily sat down, tucking her reddish hair behind her ears. "Sorry about him. He's been worse since his parents split up." Ethan stared at her, bewildered by this unexpected alliance. "Why did you do that?" She shrugged, opening her milk carton with practiced ease. What you did yesterday in Harmon's class. It was brave. Not many people stand up to Derek. She glanced at Maya. I've been wanting to talk to you anyway. I heard you're amazing at chemistry, and I'm drowning in that class. Just like that, their table of 2 became 3. The conversation flowed more easily with Lily there, her easy confidence bridging the gaps between Ethan's caution and Maya's reserve. By the time the bell rang, something fragile had formed. Not quite friendship yet, but its possibility, glimmering like the first star appearing at dusk. As they gathered their things, Lily paused. Same table tomorrow? Ethan and Maya exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Surprise, hope, wariness. Same table, Maya confirmed, her voice stronger than Ethan had heard before. Walking to his next class, Ethan felt oddly light, as though something heavy had been lifted from his shoulders. Not entirely, but enough to stand a little straighter. 3 people at a lunch table. Such a small thing in the grand scheme of life, yet it felt monumental. The afternoon brought another surprise. In gym class, traditionally a battlefield where Ethan endured his worst torments, Jason Rodriguez, a quiet basketball player who usually watched Derek's bullying without participating, tossed him the ball during team selection. "You're with us today, Parker," he said simply. Ethan fumbled the catch but held onto the ball, stunned by this minor act of inclusion. Throughout the game, Jason passed to him whenever possible, ignoring Derek's obvious displeasure. Ethan wasn't good. Years of avoiding physical activity had left him awkward and uncoordinated, but Jason never criticized, only offered brief pointers between plays. Walking home that afternoon, Ethan tried to make sense of the day's subtle shifts. One act of standing up, impulsive, unplanned, had somehow altered something fundamental in his daily existence, not dramatically. The bruise on his cheek still throbbed. Derek still hated him, but something had changed, like the first hairline crack in a dam. Small, almost imperceptible, yet holding the potential for transformation. That night, for the first time in years, Ethan didn't fall asleep dreading the next day at Westlake High. The changes continued, small ripples widening across the surface of school life. By Friday, their lunch table had grown to 5. Ethan, Maya, Lily, Jason, and Connor Reed, a theater kid with a wicked sense of humor who'd been Derek's target since 6th grade for being openly gay. They made an unlikely group. The invisible boy, the foreign girl, the coach's daughter, the quiet athlete, and the flamboyant drama student. What bound them together wasn't friendship exactly. Not yet, but a shared experience of existing on the margins, of knowing what it meant to be marked as different. During their Friday lunch, Connor leaned forward conspiratorially. "We should do something." "Do something?" Ethan echoed, wariness creeping back into his posture. "About the Dereks of this school," Connor explained, waving his fork for emphasis. "About the whole toxic hierarchy. We can't be the only ones tired of it." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Jason asked, his usual reticence giving way to curiosity. Connor's eyes gleamed. "A revolution." Maya, who had been quietly eating her noodles, looked up. "Revolution is a big word. So is harassment and intimidation, and all the other things that happen every day in these hallways." Connor replied, "Look at us. 5 people who never would have sat together before Monday. All because Ethan had the guts to speak up." Ethan shifted uncomfortably under the sudden attention. "I just told him to stop. It wasn't a big deal." "But it was," Lily insisted. "Do you know how many people talked about it afterward? How many whispered that someone finally stood up to Derek Mason?" "What kind of revolution?" Jason asked, returning to Connor's original point. Connor grinned. "I'm thinking kindness. Radical, intentional kindness. The opposite of everything Derek stands for." Ethan almost laughed. "Kindness? That's your big revolutionary idea?" "Don't underestimate it," Lily said thoughtfully. "Mean has been the currency at this school for so long, people have forgotten there's an alternative." "What would this even look like?" Maya asked, her accent more pronounced as her interest grew. They spent the rest of lunch brainstorming, voices overlapping with increasing animation. By the time the bell rang, Operation Kindness Revolution had taken shape. Small, deliberate acts of support and inclusion, particularly toward those typically targeted. Nothing flashy or confrontational, just persistent goodness infiltrating the school's culture. Monday, Connor declared as they separated for afternoon classes. "We start Monday." The weekend passed slowly for Ethan, anticipation and doubt battling within him. Sunday night, his phone, usually silent except for his mother's occasional check-ins from her night shift, buzzed with messages from the group chat Connor had created. Everyone was nervous. Everyone was committed. Monday morning arrived with pale autumn sunlight filtering through thinning clouds. Ethan arrived early, his stomach fluttering with nerves, and found the others waiting by the main entrance, a united front. "Ready?" Lily asked, her smile betraying her own nervousness. Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. They moved through the school separately but with purpose, each implementing their part of the plan. Ethan's task was simple but terrifying. Notice the invisible. Throughout the day, he made himself speak to the students who existed as he had, in the margins, heads down, avoiding attention. A hello here, a question about homework there. Small connections that cost him enormous effort, but left bewildered smiles in their wake. Maya stationed herself near the freshman lockers, offering help to lost new students. Jason intervened subtly when he spotted potential bullying situations, his athletic status providing a buffer of protection. Lily utilized her social connections to spread positivity rather than gossip. And Connor, with his theatrical flair, made public displays of complimenting those usually mocked for their differences. By lunchtime, their actions had generated a low buzz of confusion throughout Westlake. Their table had grown again. 3 freshmen Maya had helped join them, then a shy girl from Lily's math class, followed by others drawn to the unusual atmosphere of acceptance. "This is crazy," Ethan whispered to Maya as their table expanded to require another to be pulled alongside. "I've never seen anything like this." She smiled, watching the growing group with thoughtful eyes. People are hungry for belonging, for kindness, like plants turning toward light. Not everyone was pleased with the disruption to Westlake's social ecosystem. Derek and his friends watched from across the cafeteria, their expressions darkening as the days progressed and more students gravitated toward what was becoming known as the Revolution Table. By Thursday, tensions peaked. Derek cornered Ethan in the bathroom between classes, shoving him against the wall with enough force to knock the breath from his lungs. "You think you're changing things?" Derek hissed, his face inches from Ethan's. "You're nothing. You've always been nothing." Ethan's old fear surged back, but alongside it came something new, a quiet certainty that he was no longer alone. "I used to believe that," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "Because you told me so, and I had no one to tell me different." "Is this the part where you fight back?" Derek sneered, tightening his grip on Ethan's shirt. "No," Ethan said simply. "This is the part where I feel sorry for you." Confusion flickered across Derek's face. "What? You need people to fear you to feel powerful. That's sad, actually." The bathroom door swung open before Derek could respond. Jason stood there, taking in the scene with calm assessment. "Everything okay here?" Derek released Ethan with a disgusted shove. "This isn't over," he muttered before pushing past Jason and out the door. "You all right?" Jason asked, concern evident in his usually impassive expression. Ethan straightened his shirt, surprised to find his hands weren't shaking. "Yeah, I'm good." And strangely, it was true. The confrontation that would have once devastated him now felt like just another obstacle, not an ending. They walked to class together, discussing the afternoon's plans rather than dwelling on Derek's threats. The second week of the Kindness Revolution brought unexpected growth. What had begun as 5 students' quiet rebellion was spreading through Westlake like a benevolent contagion. Students who had never interacted before found connections over shared interests. A sophomore girl organized a study group for struggling students. A senior boy started walking a frequently bullied freshman to classes. The chess club and the soccer team discovered common ground during a joint lunch initiative Connor organized. The administration noticed too. Principal Winters, Lily's mother, called the original 5 to her office on Wednesday afternoon. "I understand you're behind the changes we've been seeing," she said, studying them from behind her desk. They exchanged nervous glances, uncertain if they were in trouble. "Whatever you're doing," she continued, a smile softening her professional demeanor, "keep doing it. The number of disciplinary incidents has dropped 30% in 10 days. That's unprecedented." She offered them the school's resources, an unused classroom for lunchtime meetings, official recognition as a student organization, even a small budget. The Kindness Revolution Club became a sanctioned entity, complete with sign-up sheets and a faculty advisor in the form of Mr. Harmon, who watched their progress with quiet pride. For Ethan, the transformation was as internal as it was external. The boy who had perfected invisibility now found himself reluctantly visible, not as a target but as a leader. People knew his name. They listened when he spoke. The weight of constant vigilance lifted gradually from his shoulders, allowing him to stand straighter, to meet eyes, to exist fully in spaces he had once only ghosted through. But the revolution wasn't without opposition. As their influence grew, so did the resistance from those who benefited from the old order. Notes appeared in lockers, threatening, cruel. Maya found her textbooks drenched in the girls' bathroom sink. The word traitor was scrawled across Jason's gym locker. They didn't have to guess the source. Derek and his diminishing circle watched their social capital eroding with increasing desperation. When intimidation failed to halt the revolution's momentum, they escalated. 3 weeks into the movement, Ethan arrived at school to find the hallways buzzing with tension. Cruel rumors about Maya had spread overnight through social media. Lies designed to isolate and shame her, to make her a cautionary tale for anyone who stepped out of line. He found her alone in the courtyard, her usual composure fractured, eyes red-rimmed, though she wasn't crying now. "Everyone's seen it," she said quietly as he sat beside her on the cold bench. "The photoshopped images, the lies." Anger surged through Ethan, hot and clarifying. "We'll fix this." How? The single word carried the weight of every immigrant child who had tried to belong, only to be reminded of their difference. Ethan didn't have an immediate answer, but by lunchtime, the revolution had mobilized. Connor's theater connections helped identify the digital manipulations in the fake images. Lily's social network countered the rumors with truth. Jason and his teammates made it clear they stood with Maya. Students who had benefited from the revolution's inclusivity now returned the favor, surrounding her with support. By day's end, the tide had turned. The attack that was meant to destroy Maya instead revealed the strength of the new connections forming throughout Westlake. Principal Winters launched an investigation into the cyberbullying, and though nothing could be definitively proven, Derek and his closest friends received in-school suspensions for related incidents. That Friday, exactly 1 month after Ethan had first stood up in history class, the revolution held its largest gathering yet. Over 100 students filled the designated classroom during lunch, spilling into the hallway. Athletes and academics, freshmen and seniors, former bullies and former victims, united by a growing commitment to a different way of being together. Ethan, still uncomfortable with attention but learning to bear it, stood before them with his original 4 allies. "When I stood up for Maya that day," he began, his voice soft but carrying in the attentive silence, "I wasn't trying to start anything. I was just tired. Tired of watching cruelty win. Tired of being afraid." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I never expected what would happen next. I never expected all of you. The real revolution isn't what we did." Lily continued, taking up the thread. "It's what each of you are doing every day. Choosing kindness when it would be easier not to. Seeing people who used to be invisible. We talk about school being preparation for the real world." Connor added, his theatrical voice projecting without effort. "But this is the real world. Right here. And we get to decide what kind of world we're creating." Maya stepped forward, her natural reserve giving weight to her rare public words. "In my culture, there is a saying, many snowflakes together become an avalanche. One act of kindness may seem small, but together," she gestured to the crowded room, her meaning clear. As the gathering dispersed, energized by the shared purpose, Mr. Harmon approached their small group. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I taught that lesson on the civil rights movement, I never imagined it would lead to this." Ethan smiled, remembering the day that had changed everything. "History in action, right?" "Indeed." Mr. Harmon's gaze swept over the dispersing students. "You've started something remarkable here. The question is, what happens next?" It was Jason, usually the quietest among them, who answered. "It grows. Beyond Westlake. It has to." Their revolution did grow, evolving as the school year progressed. They created a website documenting their approach, offering resources to other schools struggling with bullying cultures. Local news featured their story, then regional networks. Other schools reached out, launching their own kindness initiatives. For Ethan personally, the transformation was profound. The boy who had once calculated his movements to remain unseen now helped others find their voices. His friendship with Maya deepened into something neither had expected. A bond formed in adversity, but flourishing in the new world they were helping create. The bruises stopped appearing. The fear receded, replaced by purpose. Even Derek's story took an unexpected turn. As his social power diminished, the facade of the untouchable bully cracked, revealing glimpses of the struggling boy beneath. When his parents' contentious divorce finalized mid-year and he arrived at school hollow-eyed and withdrawn, it was Ethan who approached him, not with condemnation, but with the simple offer of a seat at their table. "Why would you do this?" Derek asked, suspicious of the outstretched hand from someone he had tormented for years. After everything? Because the revolution isn't just for some people, Ethan replied simply. It's for everyone who needs it. Derek didn't become a convert overnight. Trust built slowly, painfully, with setbacks and difficult conversations. But by spring, he sat sometimes at the edges of revolution gatherings, listening, occasionally contributing insights into the bully mindset that proved valuable to their expanding program. On the last day of school, as summer sunshine streamed through classroom windows, Ethan found himself looking out at the courtyard where he had once hidden from the world. A year ago, he couldn't have imagined the changes a single moment of courage would bring, not just to his school, but to his understanding of himself. Maya joined him by the window, her presence now as familiar as his own heartbeat. What are you thinking about? She asked, her English now nearly accent-free after a year of constant practice. That day in history class, he replied. How scared I was, how I had no idea what would happen. She smiled, resting her hand lightly beside his on the windowsill, not quite touching but close enough to feel the warmth. Would you do it again, knowing everything that followed? Ethan considered the question, thinking of all that had changed. The friendships formed, the purpose found, the fear conquered. The revolution that began with 5 students and now connected thousands across dozens of schools. The countless stories they'd heard from others who found courage through their example. In a heartbeat, he answered, his voice steady with certainty. Some revolutions start with a whisper, not a shout. Outside, students crossed the courtyard in mixed groups that would have been unthinkable a year ago. The rigid social boundaries dissolved by something as simple and as revolutionary as kindness. One small act of standing up, of refusing to remain invisible, had initiated a transformation none of them could have predicted. A bullied kid had stood up for a classmate, unaware it would inspire a school revolution. But perhaps that was how all meaningful change began. Not with grand designs or perfect understanding, but with a single moment of courage, rippling outward in ways no one could fully anticipate, touching lives not yet known, creating possibilities not yet imagined. As the final bell of the year rang, Ethan stepped away from the window and into the future he had helped create, one act of kindness at a time.